I presented these slides at the Ladies That UX event on the 27th of February and wanted to share them to a wider audience. First of all, let me give you a little quick background about me. So I started my career actually as an engineer. I worked at Philips on first-of-a-kind product development before moving more into understanding how users interact with technology and then becoming a user researcher at Serco Experience Lab for about 10 years. I then went on to create the Good App Guide. What I'm most known for is probably, in the kids industry, is probably my involvement with children's apps and providing digital parenting advice. So I have reviewed hundreds of children's apps through observational research with kids and talking to parents and children. I've also been a judge for the BAFTA Children's Digital Awards and also the Bologna Ragazzi Awards in 2018 and 2019. After the Good App Guide, I actually went on to start my own business, which is called Diggles Consulting. And what I work on primarily there is advising and supporting the design of children's digital products. Some of those are purely entertainment products, and a lot of those have an educational angle to them. So I can get involved throughout the design lifecycle and particularly get involved in user testing. Beyond this, I give regular talks to parents, for example, through Employees Matter, but also directly to some schools, on things like managing screen time, handling social media, and other digital parenting related issues. I also volunteer my time as a STEM ambassador, talking to children, trying to inspire their interest in STEM, and I run a First Lego League junior team and a Lego and Code club at my local school, as well as being a mum myself of 2 children. So, first of all, I wanted to have a talk about does user experience really matter? It's often something that people talk about with children's products that, you know, kids, they're great, they muddle through and they work things out as they go along. Maybe the user experience is not so important. So first of all, I wanted to show 2 videos of clips of children and their first experiences with some digital products.
Go on. How do we get him in?
So what you can see here is her leaning back. She's clearly waiting for the bus.
Not going.
She's clearly expecting buses, you know, buses, right? Buses drive away. So she's got into her head that's what this bus is supposed to do, and yet it is not going anywhere.
When will the bus go?
Then interestingly, this app here, the majority of the app is over there on that right-hand section, and even when she's scrolled over there, she still has this mental model that it's all about the bus. She's expecting the bus to move, and so doesn't realise that an entire school awaits.
Circulatory system. Listen to blood vessels, blood vessels, heart, blood vessels, 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 blood vessels. My muscles. The muscular system. Abdominal muscle, pectoral muscle. Oh, it's quite boring.
It's quite boring.
Now, an interesting question if you're watching this, have you noticed anything else that you could have clicked on?
Do you think there's anything else you can do on it? Have you seen these arrows? What do you think that might do?
Oh. Certainly your bones don't make a rabbit.
So, both of those clips hopefully underlined how important user experience is when you are starting to use an app, and particularly in this first onboarding experience. The onboarding experience being the experience when you first get to grips with a product. So you're becoming on board with that product. And interestingly, particularly with children, this is a huge challenge because you often can't use words. For some of the younger audience, they're not going to read them. They may well not listen to you even if you add it as a voiceover, although as they get older, that is at least a help. So what else are you able to do? One of the first things is that affordance is key. If, for example, this bus, in this case, you would have expected it to drive off, buses drive, vehicles move away, the affordance of this was wrong, and this is one of the reasons that this particular product had an issue, albeit actually Dr. Panda, from whom this app is developed, is actually generally provides extremely high quality apps. Something as simple as getting the affordance wrong here has caused a problem. Secondly, children are not keen to follow a step-by-step tutorial that feels very learning. They're not doing anything, they're just listening and absorbing. However, if you've played, for example, games like Monument Valley, you will have seen onboarding processes that involve play from the start. And what something like Monument Valley, and there are various other examples, do is that from the beginning they have a very cut-down version of what this final game that they're kind of getting onboarded to is. And they introduced one thing you need to know at a time, but in a way that you are playing. So it is to some extent akin to a tutorial and step-by-step, but you're not aware of that because you're playing it and you're learning each of the tools for yourself, which makes it much easier for a child or any person to actually internalise it. Another aspect that you can use is subtle visual cues. You see in a lot of apps for children a hand symbol come and kind of drag screens or pull or move just to indicate the sort of movement subtly that is available, or tools or toolbars or navigational links that they could choose. And one of the key things with this, particularly during onboarding, potentially throughout, is making sure that you provide the support at the right time. I do believe that if you can let children get onboarded without any help, then that's fantastic, and letting children have a chance to play and explore for themselves is great. So you don't want to intervene too early potentially, but what you also don't want to do is leave a child frustrated. So it's important to potentially do a lot of user research and have a look and see when that support is needed or what the indicator is, whether that's time, whether that's that they haven't discovered a particular feature within a certain amount of time, or something along those lines. It's important to get that timing right. The next question is ease of use always the answer? Now, I'm a user experience professional. I've worked in user experience and user-centered design for years, and quite clearly making things easy to use is one of the things that's important to me. However, the picture is far more complicated when you come to development of children's products, particularly learning products, but also fun games. Now, quite honestly, we can all agree that easy games are just not a lot of fun. If you could go in, you knew exactly what you were doing, really, it's not fun to be able to do it straight away. So a certain element of challenge is inherently necessary in anything that's supposed to be fun and playful. But secondly, and this comes back to something really interesting that I've always believed and have heard underlined by a range of people, including a speaker I heard talk about this very passionately at BET, that actually when you are learning, if it's far too simple, if you go through a simple step-by-step process, whether that's that you're building a Lego model or following a cake recipe or sitting in class and following step-by-step or doing some kind of science experiment, if you're just following the instructions, your brain is concentrating on that and it is not absorbing the learning and it is not being creative. And one example that I heard recently was that if an experiment was done where they gave one set of children a step-by-step learning experience that was beautifully staged and simple to use, and another group the same challenge but far less instructions and help. The group that had all the step-by-step instructions had no trouble, whizzed through. The others really struggled. But made some progress, didn't actually finish the challenge. The following week they came back and did something similar but gave both group's minimal support. And lo and behold, the group that had been struggling the previous time, who'd had less instructions, were far more able to actually complete that. And it doesn't surprise me at all that that's the case. And the group that had previously followed the step-by-step instructions, no problem, had not actually learnt why they were doing that and what they were doing, and internalised the lesson they were trying to learn. So what's really important is that you put the challenge within the gameplay, if it's a game, within the learning aspect itself. But, and as we've seen in those last couple of videos, poor user experience is still not good. That's not an excuse to give poor user experience. You need to be able to find where you want to go. You need to be able to understand what tools are actually available to you. You don't want big UX barriers in the way, but that doesn't mean you have to remove the learning and gameplay challenge at the same time. In order to do that well, what that actually means is that you need a very good understanding of ages and stages of development. Now, I'm not a child psychologist. I have not learnt officially all about that, but over the years of studying hundreds of children's apps that are educational, mapping those against curriculum and early years curriculum and the national curriculum in the UK and Common Core in the US, I have built up a very strong understanding of ages and stages of development, and there are a lot of resources out there that you can turn to that will give you, as if you're a parent looking at it that way, or from any direction, will give you details of how children develop at what stage. I'm always also happy to help people if they approach me specifically on that. It is really important for developing products for children. The next aspect is to make sure that you're not just catering for the child, you are also thinking about the parent or potentially teacher involved in the process. It's really important to think about how the parent is involved in this process, because in fact you can't assume that parents are always as heavily involved as we in the industry would potentially like. You often find, and this is no criticism, that parents will hand over digital devices and are not very involved with what's going on the screen. They're using it as something to entertain a child while they get on with other things, which parents have a lot of. However, there are times that parents get involved. They're often the one downloading it. There may be times a child will call them over, and it's important to be smart about that. You also need to understand the child's needs and behaviours very strongly surrounding that, whether there's any time when they need parental support, when this is they're going to be working on their own, and to make sure you cater for that child first and foremost, if they're the ones who are likely to be handling the product you're developing primarily. But also be very smart about how you involve the parent. For example, if they never use this tablet that the child is using, should you be providing an accompanying app for the parent on a phone, potentially? Are there ways that you can engage the child in such a way that they'll be so excited or so proud about what they're doing that they want to go back and show a parent? Are there other ways that you can make sure that the parent stays engaged and informed about what's going on? Those are the kinds of things you should be building into your thinking early on in a project that's going out to a digital audience for kids. And then the final point I wanted to make was all around user testing. Now, I've spent many years, almost 15 years now, doing user testing, and in the recent years, particularly with children, also with parents and teachers. And often the barrier initially is people telling me that their budget's too tight, that they work within agile sprints and there just isn't time. And my basic answer is all of that is an excuse. It is absolutely vital that you are designing with children in your process in order to develop good products for children. Doing something is better than nothing. Absolutely, there's a huge difference between using someone who's extremely experienced and knows, has done a lot of user testing, particularly with children, and they will have an awful lot of experience, and that will bring in a huge amount of insight. However, doing something, just putting it in front of some children that you can get hold of and watching for 10 minutes is going to be better than nothing. It's really, really important. You are not a child, you are not your target audience, particularly in this case, and it is very hard to anticipate what they're going to do without seeing it for yourself. I've been doing this for many years, and I still would not want to guess in many scenarios exactly how children will respond. Secondly, don't leave it too late. I have far too many people who come to me interested in doing user testing when they've got to a beta stage, and they assume that you can't test with children earlier, and that is not something I agree with. I think it is absolutely possible to test reasonably early. Yes, there are some areas of prototypes and things, in some ways you would test with adults that wouldn't work with children, but if you can make it possible for you to test with competitor apps, for example, that demonstrate some of the things you're thinking of putting into your product, that's a brilliant way of getting insights about how a child responds to particular sorts of features or navigational styles. And you can also make it much more of a co-creation exercise and get them involved and more of a kind of arts and craftsy type experience for them, so they feel more involved at a much earlier paper prototyping sort of phase. There are lots of things you can do. The important thing is to do something. Also, it's really important to realise that fast turnaround is also possible. If you've been worked with agencies and done user research, generally it takes several days, possibly weeks, possibly a week or more, to come back with a fully fledged report. When you're talking about digital development in agile sprints, that is often just simply not possible. I often provide a service where I do the testing on one day and literally am reporting back the next day. And yes, that doesn't give me as much time as I'd ideally like to analyse the data and go through it. Providing those high-level, fast reactions and being willing to work directly with the team who are actioning the insights means that it's far more valuable to that team, and that's something that I think everyone should be moving towards. And if you are working with children, I could spend hours talking about the best approaches to actually doing the research, but some of the key things are that observation is more important than interview. Make sure you are watching what they're doing, particularly with younger ages who can't verbalise and can't analyse and explain their behaviour. They're bound to be far too positive if you actually ask them questions. Oh, what did you think? Oh, it was brilliant. They'll tell you, even though you've just watched them struggle for 10 minutes on something. So you need to spend a lot of time watching sessions. They also have very short attention spans, and if they go off something, it's really hard to get their attention back. So think about the design, think about how to chunk up sessions into smaller bits, or to have really small, potentially really small sessions that are really short. You can even think about using libraries or other places where you could potentially be recruiting people on the fly for really short 5-10 minutes of just playing with what you've got. Lots and lots of different options. The important thing is to try something if you haven't done this before. Give it a go, and then you'll see what works best for your business and your circumstances. So that brings me to my conclusions. First, really important point, within children's products, particularly digital products, user experience is absolutely key. Please don't imagine that poor user experience is acceptable in this domain at all. Secondly, when you are thinking about training someone up and getting their first use of your system, they are going to lose interest in your product almost immediately if they can't use it. Children have huge amounts of patience occasionally, but no patience whatsoever for something that just seems really annoying and difficult. So onboarding is absolutely vital. It needs to be playful, not a step-by-step tutorial. Think playful design. It needs to be simple, and it needs to be well tested to make sure it really works. Make sure that, as well as having very good user experience, you make sure that the challenge itself is intelligently designed in. That means that what you have done is made sure that you have put challenge in the gameplay or in the learning aspects, so you're really forcing children to think in order to get the best out of them, and you're not putting the challenge into the background navigational understanding and user experience stuff. But it's really important, and to do that you really do need a firm understanding of children's ages and stages of development. And then don't forget the parents or teachers. You may well need to be designing these products with various different users in mind, and you need a very smart understanding of how they're involved, how to engage them, and what will work best. And again, speaking to those people is really important, and potentially testing things, well, definitely testing things with them as well if they're the target audience or part of the audience. And finally, never use fast turnaround, small budgets, or kids as an excuse to not do user testing. You absolutely need to do user testing and build it in from the very start. It is absolutely feasible to do that, and the insights you will get will be completely invaluable. So hopefully that has been useful. I can't take questions on a YouTube video, but if you do have particular questions, you can always contact me via LinkedIn or via my website or Twitter or Facebook. And I hope that has been useful. Thanks very much for listening.